She came back to herself through pain first. A deep, dragging ache that felt like it split her in two and sewn her back together wrong. The kind of pain that didn't scream but stayed, heavy and dull, like gravity had doubled inside her body. The ceiling above her was white, too white, washed in fluorescent light that hummed faintly, almost politely, as if the room were apologizing for existing. Machines beeped in a slow, steady rhythm near her left ear. A smell of antiseptic and warm linen hung in the air. Someone said her name. Emily. Her eyelids fluttered. She turned her head slightly, the motion pulling a low sound from her throat before she could stop it. "There you are," a nurse said gently. A woman in blue scrubs leaned into her field of vision, her smile practiced but kind. "You did great. He's perfect." Emily's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "He," she whispered. The nurse nodded and stepped aside. And then he was there, a small bundle, warm and impossibly light, placed carefully into Emily's arms. His skin was flushed and wrinkled, his tiny mouth opening and closing as if he were already trying to argue with the world. His cry cut through the room, sharp and alive, and something inside Emily cracked open so suddenly it hurt more than the labor ever had. "Oh!" she breathed. Her hand shook as she adjusted her grip. Terrified she might drop him, terrified she might breathe wrong. His head fit beneath her chin, like it had been designed for that exact place. His cries softened into a hiccuping sound, then faded entirely as he settled against her chest. A laugh slipped out of her, half sob, half disbelief. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey, I'm here. I've got you." For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the hours of pain, not the exhaustion that felt bone deep, not the world outside this room. Just the warmth of him, the slow rise and fall of his chest, the way his fingers curled reflexively around the fabric of her hospital gown, as if he already knew how easily things could be taken away. She lifted her gaze, searching instinctively. "Mark," she said softly. He stood near the window, his back to her. The city outside the glass was washed in late afternoon light, tall buildings casting long shadows across the street below. Cars moved in slow lines. Somewhere far beneath them, horns blared and people hurried through their ordinary lives, unaware that Emily's world had just split into before and after. Mark didn't turn around. He was dressed too well for a hospital room. Dark slacks, tailored jacket, polished shoes that reflected the harsh light on the floor. His posture was rigid, shoulders drawn tight as he stared down at his phone. Emily frowned. "Mark," she said again, a little louder this time. "Come look. He's beautiful." The word hung there. Beautiful. Mark finally shifted his weight. He glanced over his shoulder, just briefly, his eyes flicking from the baby to Emily and back again. There was no smile, no softness, just something flat and distracted, like he was already late for somewhere more important. "Yeah," he said. "He looks fine." Something cold slid into Emily's chest. Before she could respond, the door opened. Not softly, not with the gentle knock she would have expected in a maternity ward. It opened decisively, the way doors do when the person on the other side is used to being obeyed. The sound of heels clicked across the floor. Emily's eyes moved toward the doorway. The woman who entered looked like she had stepped out of a boardroom, not a hospital. Her suit was a deep charcoal, perfectly pressed. The jacket fitted sharply at the waist. A strand of pearls rested at her throat. Her hair was styled immaculately, not a strand out of place. She carried herself with the ease of someone who had never once questioned whether a room belonged to her. Margaret Hale, Mark's mother. Emily stiffened instinctively, tightening her hold on the baby. "Margaret," she said, "I didn't know you were." Margaret didn't answer. She walked to the foot of the bed and stopped, her expression unreadable as she took in the scene. The hospital bed, the monitors, Emily's pale face. the newborn in her arms. Her gaze lingered on the baby for less than a second. Then she reached into her leather handbag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. The sound it made when she dropped it onto Emily's legs was loud in the quiet room. "Sign it," Margaret said. Emily blinked. "I'm sorry." "The divorce papers," Margaret continued, her voice calm, clipped, practiced. "Everything is prepared. You just need to sign on the indicated lines." For a moment, Emily thought she had misheard. The room tilted slightly. What did you say?" Mark checked his watch. Emily turned her head toward him slowly, the baby shifting against her chest. "Mark." He didn't meet her eyes. "Mom thinks it's best to handle this now," he said. "While everything's contained." "Contained?" Emily laughed once, sharply, then stopped when it sent pain slicing through her abdomen. "This is a joke," she said. "This has to be a joke." Margaret leaned forward, placing her manicured hands on the metal railing at the foot of the bed. "The paternity test is already scheduled," she said. "Results will be expedited. Regardless, the divorce is non-negotiable." Emily's mouth went dry. "You're saying this child..." Her voice broke. She swallowed hard. "You're saying my son might not be Mark's?" Margaret's lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but something colder. "We prefer to verify facts before making long-term commitments." Emily looked down at the baby. Her baby. His face was peaceful now, unaware of the words being spoken over him like a sentence. "This is your grandson," she said quietly. "You don't even want to hold him?" Margaret straightened. "No." The word landed heavier than the envelope. "Mark," Emily whispered, "say something. Please." He exhaled slowly, like someone bracing for impact. "Emily," he said, "this doesn't have to be ugly. If you cooperate, it can be handled cleanly." Handled. She felt something inside her chest begin to burn, slow and steady. "I just gave birth," she said. "I was in labor for 16 hours. You were holding my hand an hour ago. You told me you loved me." Margaret interrupted. "That was adrenaline." Emily stared at her. "You were a phase," Margaret continued. "A rebellion. A distraction. My son has responsibilities. A company to protect. A family name. We cannot afford uncertainty." Uncertainty. Emily's hands clenched. "I supported Mark for 2 years," she said, her voice rising despite herself. "I organized his meetings. I proofread his proposals. I cooked for him. And you were compensated." Margaret snapped. "You lived comfortably. That arrangement is over." Mark shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "There will be a settlement," Margaret added. $10,000. Enough to relocate somewhere modest. Start over. Emily felt lightheaded. "Start over," she repeated. "With a newborn?" Margaret's eyes hardened. "If you refuse," she said calmly, "we will pursue full custody. Our legal team is prepared to demonstrate instability, lack of resources, and, given your background, questionable judgment." Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. "You'd take my child?" Margaret reached into her purse again and withdrew a pen, sleek in gold. "Sign." For a long moment, no one spoke. The machines continued their steady beeping. Emily looked at Mark. "Look at him," she said. "Please, just look." Mark's gaze flickered to the baby. For a split second, something like doubt crossed his face. Then Margaret straightened slightly, and whatever spine he had collapsed. "Just sign it," he said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Something in Emily went very still. There was a memory, sudden and sharp, rising unbidden. Mark in a small coffee shop 2 years earlier, laughing as he spilled sugar across the counter. His hand brushing hers as he apologized. The way he had looked at her then, like she was something rare, like she mattered. The memory snapped shut. Emily inhaled slowly, carefully, the way she had been taught to breathe through contractions. "Give me the pen," she said. Margaret smiled. Emily signed. Her name flowed across the page smoothly, without hesitation. When she handed the papers back, Margaret gathered them quickly, as if afraid Emily might change her mind. "We'll be taking the baby for the DNA test shortly," Margaret said, reaching forward. "Don't," Emily said. Her voice was low now. "Steady." Margaret paused. "Touch him," Emily continued, "and I will scream. Security will be here before you reach the door." Margaret withdrew her hand. "Enjoy your time," she said coolly. "It won't last." She turned and walked out. Mark hesitated at the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said. Emily didn't look at him. The door closed. The room fell quiet again. Emily waited until she heard footsteps fade down the hall. Then she shifted the baby gently to one arm and reached into the side pocket of her hospital bag. She didn't pull out her phone. She reached deeper, past the spare clothes and diapers, to the hidden seam she had stitched herself months ago. Her fingers closed around cold metal. She brought the device out into the light. It wasn't a normal phone. She dialed one number. It rang once. "Yes," a voice answered. Emily looked down at her son. "The cover is blown," she said calmly. "I need extraction. Now." There was a brief pause. "Understood," the voice replied. "Location?" Emily glanced around the room, at the sterile walls, the machines, the envelope-shaped bruise forming on her legs where the papers had landed. "New York," she said. "And it's time." She ended the call. The baby stirred, then settled again. Emily pressed her lips to his forehead. "They think they discarded us," she whispered. "They have no idea what they just started." The hospital corridor felt longer on the way out. Emily moved slowly, deliberately, her steps measured to keep the ache in her abdomen from flaring too sharply. Every few seconds she adjusted her grip on the baby, instinctively shielding him from the draft that slipped through the open doors and vents. The lights overhead buzzed faintly, rows of identical panels stretching ahead like a tunnel that refused to end. 2 security guards waited near the exit. They weren't aggressive. They didn't need to be. Their posture said everything. Arms folded, eyes fixed just above her head, bodies angled slightly inward, as if she were a problem they hoped will resolve itself without effort. "Miss Carter," one of them said quietly, glancing at a clipboard. "We've been instructed to escort you out." "Out?" Emily asked, stopping in front of them. "Yes, ma'am. The room is no longer authorized under your name." Emily nodded once. "I understand," she said. The guard blinked, surprised by her calm. She walked past them without another word. The door slid open automatically, releasing a rush of cold air that bit to the thin hospital blanket wrapped around the baby. Outside, the sky had darkened, heavy clouds hanging low over the city. A steady rain fell, blurring the parking lot into streaks of gray and white. Emily paused beneath the narrow awning. Behind her, the automatic doors hissed shut. For a moment, she stood there, watching the rain soak the pavement. A nurse hurried past her, head down, shoulders hunched, disappearing into the downpour. Somewhere to her right, an engine started, then pulled away. Emily felt very small, not helpless, just exposed. She adjusted the blanket around her son, murmuring softly as he stirred. His fingers curled against her chest again, seeking warmth, contact, reassurance. "I've got you," she whispered. "I promise." Headlights cut through the rain. A sleek black sedan rolled to stop directly in front of the awning, its tires barely making a sound against the wet asphalt. The car was understated, elegant without trying to be impressive, the kind of vehicle people didn't look twice at because they assumed it belonged exactly where it was. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat that shed rain effortlessly. He opened a large umbrella and walked toward her with unhurried confidence, stopping just short of the awning. "Emily," he said. She looked up. For the first time since the papers had landed on her legs, something in her chest loosened. "Daniel," she replied. Daniel Brooks held the umbrella over both of them, shielding her and the baby from rain. His eyes flicked briefly to the security guards, then back to Emily, assessing the situation without asking questions. "Let's get you out of here," he said. He opened the back door of the sedan. The interior was warm, softly lit, leather seats immaculate. Emily slid in carefully, her breath catching as she lowered herself onto the seat. Daniel closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. As the car pulled away, Emily watched the hospital recede to the rain-streaked window. The building loomed behind them, impersonal and indifferent, as if it hadn't just witnessed the collapse of her marriage. Daniel glanced at her in the rear-view mirror. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "Just tired," she said. He nodded. "Where to?" Emily hesitated. Then, quietly, the Midtown apartment, the one on 57th. Daniel's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Understood." The city slid by in muted tones. Traffic lights reflected off wet pavement. Pedestrians huddled under umbrellas. Faces turned inward against the weather. Emily leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes briefly. A memory surfaced without warning. A much smaller apartment, years ago. Boxes stacked everywhere. Emily sitting on the floor, eating takeout straight from the container, because she didn't own a table yet. Her father standing in the doorway, watching her with that unreadable expression he always wore when he was deciding whether to say something important. "You don't owe the world an explanation," he had said then, "but you do owe yourself the truth." The memory faded. Emily opened her eyes. Daniel turned onto a quieter street, then into the underground garage of a tall residential building. The car eased into a reserved space near the elevator. Inside, the air was warm and still. Daniel was already opening her door. "Take your time," he said. "I've got everything." Emily stepped out slowly, bracing herself on the doorframe for a moment. Daniel noticed immediately, offering his arm without comment. They rode the elevator in silence. The doors opened directly into the apartment. The lights came on automatically, revealing clean lines, neutral tones, wide windows overlooking the city. The space felt calm, controlled, safe. Daniel set her bag down gently near the door. "I'll have the pediatric nurse here within the hour," he said, "and security will rotate downstairs tonight." Emily nodded, easing herself onto the couch. "Thank you." Daniel hesitated, then asked, "Did they?" She shook her head once. "No," she said, "but they tried." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Do you want me to initiate protocol?" Emily looked down at her son, who slept peacefully, unaware of how close he had come to being taken. "Not yet," she said. "I need to breathe first." Daniel inclined his head. "As you wish." He moved toward the door. "Daniel," she said. He turned. "They think I'm broke," she added quietly. A flicker of something like satisfaction crossed his face. "That will make things simpler," he said. When he left, the apartment settled into silence. Emily leaned back, exhaustion finally catching up to her. The city lights outside flickered on one by one as evening deepened. She watched them for a moment, then closed her eyes again. Another memory drifted in uninvited. A boardroom. Years ago. Men twice her age sitting stiffly around a long table. Emily at the head, listening as they explained why a deal wouldn't work. Why she should reconsider. Why she should let someone else handle it. She had listened politely. Then she had dismantled their arguments one by one, calmly, methodically, until no one in the room could meet her eyes. The memory didn't bring anger. It brought clarity. Emily opened her eyes and reached for her phone. The secure one Daniel had slipped into her bag earlier. She unlocked it and scrolled briefly. There were messages already waiting. Account confirmed. Legal teams on standby. Transportation secured. She exhaled slowly. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly. Emily adjusted the baby in her arms and stood, wincing slightly as she did. She walked toward the bedroom, moving carefully, deliberately, like someone reclaiming space that had always belonged to her. "They wanted you gone before you mattered," she whispered to her son. "That's the mistake people always make." She laid him down gently in the bassinet beside the bed, watching as he stirred, then settled again. Emily straightened and looked around the room. Tomorrow, she would make calls. Tomorrow, the world would begin to shift. But tonight, she sat on the edge of the bed, listening to her son breathe, and let the quiet do its work. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Emily woke before dawn. The city outside the windows was still wrapped in darkness. Skyscrapers reduced to silhouettes against a bruised gray sky. Traffic murmured faintly far below, a distant, constant reminder that the world didn't stop just because hers had cracked open. Her body protested as she shifted, pain flaring low and sharp, but she welcomed it. Pain meant she was present. Pain meant she hadn't disappeared. She turned her head toward the bassinet beside the bed. Her son slept peacefully, fists tucked near his cheeks, lips pursed in a tiny frown, as if he were already disapproving of something. Emily watched him for a long moment, committing the image to memory. There was comfort in the simplicity of his breathing, the uncomplicated trust of it. She rose slowly, wrapped herself in a robe, and padded toward the kitchen. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of appliances. She poured herself a glass of water, drank half of it, then leaned against the counter, grounding herself. Her phone vibrated. One message. "Daniel. Security reports Mark Hale left the hospital 20 minutes ago. He's headed to his mother's townhouse." Emily stared at the screen. So it had begun. She typed a brief reply. Understood. She didn't ask how Daniel knew. She didn't need to. Another message followed almost immediately. "Daniel, Margaret has already contacted a family law firm. They're pushing for an emergency hearing." Emily closed her eyes briefly. Of course they were. She felt a familiar sensation settle over her then. Something cold and steady, like a switch flipping quietly into place. Years ago, in another life, this feeling had meant it was time to move. She walked back into the bedroom, careful not to wake the baby, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her phone rested loosely in her hand, the secure device heavy with potential. A memory surfaced, sharper this time. Emily at 23, standing in a narrow hallway outside her father's hospital room. The smell of antiseptic again, different hospital, same sterile weight. He had been thin then, fragile in a way she wasn't ready to accept. "You don't need permission to be who you are," he had said quietly. "But you do need discipline. Power without control destroys itself." She hadn't understood fully at the time. She did now. Emily unlocked the phone and opened the secure channel. "Good morning," she said calmly when the call connected. "Morning," Daniel replied. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Who's handling the Hale side?" she asked. "Grayson and Locke," he said. "They built their reputation on aggressive custody battles. They'll push instability. Finances. Emotional state." Emily nodded once. "They'll say I left the hospital against medical advice," she said. "That I have no fixed address." "Already anticipated," Daniel replied. "Your medical discharge was documented properly, and the Midtown property is prepared." Emily's gaze drifted back to the bassinet. "Good." There was a pause. "Emily," Daniel said carefully, Do you want me to initiate acquisition talks today? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked closer to the window, looking down at the city as it began to wake. Lights flickered on in offices. Cars multiplied on the streets below. People hurried into motion, unaware of the machinery already turning beneath their feet. Yes, she said, but not publicly. Understood. Starwood Hale Holdings lenders, she continued. Quietly. I want to know exactly how leveraged they are. Daniel exhaled softly. They won't see it coming. That's the point. She ended the call. Emily returned to the bed and sat again, this time closer to her son. She reached out, brushing a finger lightly against his tiny hand. His fingers curled reflexively around hers, warm and firm. Her chest tightened. They don't get to decide our future, she whispered. Not anymore. A knock sounded softly at the door. Emily stiffened. Another knock, gentle, measured. She rose carefully and moved toward the door. When she opened it, a woman stood in the hallway wearing a navy blazer and carrying a leather portfolio. She looked to be in her early 40s, hair pulled back neatly, eyes sharp but kind. Ms. Carter? The woman asked quietly. Yes. I'm Sarah Whitman, she said. Daniel asked me to come. Emily stepped aside. Sarah entered the apartment, taking in the space with a quick, professional glance. She set her portfolio down on the dining table and turned back to Emily. I'll be direct, Sarah said. Margaret Hale is filing for emergency custody based on claims of instability and fraud. They're requesting supervised visitation for Mark pending DNA verification. Emily folded her arms loosely. And the judge assigned is fair but conservative, Sarah continued. She'll want stability, documentation, proof. Emily nodded. You'll have it, she said. Sarah's lips curved slightly. I thought you might say that. Emily gestured toward the bedroom. My son is asleep, she said. We'll talk quietly. They sat at the table. Sarah opened her portfolio, sliding documents across the surface with practiced efficiency. We'll respond with a preemptive filing, she said. Full financial disclosure, property ownership, trust documentation. We'll establish stability beyond dispute. Emily listened without interrupting. However, Sarah added, once this information is submitted, there's no going back. Your identity will be public. Emily met her gaze. They forfeited discretion when they threatened my child. Sarah studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well. As Sarah spoke, outlining timelines and procedures, Emily felt something shift internally. Not excitement, not fear, but resolve. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. Her phone vibrated again. Daniel. Initial lender outreach complete. Hale Holdings is overextended by 42%. 2 bridge loans due within 10 days. Emily allowed herself a small exhale. She pictured Margaret Hale sitting in her townhouse, making calls, issuing orders, confident that money and reputation would insulate her as they always had. Margaret believed in momentum. She didn't understand gravity. Another memory flickered briefly. Margaret at a charity gala years earlier, dismissing a waitress with a flick of her wrist. Emily watching from across the room, unseen, noting the ease with which power dismissed humanity. The memories settled, heavy and instructive. Emily leaned back in her chair. Sarah, she said, how quickly can we secure an emergency injunction preventing removal of my child from my custody? Sarah didn't hesitate. Today. Do it. Sarah nodded, already making notes. And Sarah, Emily added, yes. If they escalate, Emily said quietly, I want every move documented. No shortcuts. Sarah closed her portfolio. They will, she said, and we will. When Sarah left an hour later, the apartment felt different, charged, Awake. Emily moved through the room slowly, aware of her body, her breath, her presence. She paused beside the bassinet again, watching her son wake, eyes blinking open uncertainly. "Good morning," she whispered. He stretched, a tiny sound escaping his mouth. She smiled. Outside, the city was fully alive now. Somewhere across town, Margaret Hale was assembling her lawyers, confident that this would end the way such things always had. Emily picked up her phone. "Daniel," she said when he answered, "prepare the contingency." There was a brief pause. "Which one?" he asked. Emily looked at her son, then out at the city, all of them. By mid-morning, the city had shifted into its sharper gear. Emily felt it from the windows of the apartment. The tempo outside changing, traffic tightening, the quiet urgency that always preceded important decisions. She sat at the dining table with her phone face down, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside her, listening as her son slept again in the bassinet nearby. The calm was deliberate. She had learned long ago that stillness unnerved people more than noise. Her phone vibrated. She didn't rush to answer it. She waited until the vibration stopped, then picked it up and read the message. "Daniel, they filed. Emergency custody hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Margaret is pushing for sealed proceedings." Emily exhaled slowly. Sealed meant control. It meant Margaret wanted to keep this quiet, contained, manageable. Emily typed back, "We won't oppose sealing." There was a pause before the reply. Daniel understood. But once disclosure hits, sealing won't matter. Emily looked down at her son. "No," she murmured aloud. "It won't." She stood carefully, moving through the apartment with practiced efficiency. She showered quickly, mindful of the stitches, dressed in simple clothes, soft fabric, neutral colors. Nothing that drew attention. Nothing that suggested excess. The doorbell rang precisely at 10. Emily opened the door to find Sarah Whitman standing there again, this time accompanied by a younger associate, carrying a tablet and a stack of folders. "Good morning," Sarah said. "We're on a tight clock." Emily stepped aside. They settled at the table again. Sarah spread documents across the surface, sliding one folder toward Emily. "This is what they're claiming," she said. "Unstable emotional state, financial dependency, potential fraud regarding identity." Emily scanned the page briefly. "They're accusing me of lying about who I am," she said. Sarah nodded. "And of manipulating Mark." Emily let out a quiet breath. "They really believe that," she said, "that I needed him." Sarah watched her carefully. "Did you?" Emily looked up. "No," she said simply. "He needed the idea of me." Sarah closed the folder. "We'll respond with partial disclosure today," she said. "Enough to dismantle their narrative without revealing everything." Emily nodded. "That gives them time to adjust," she said. "They'll think they can still pivot." "Exactly." The associate cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said, tapping his tablet. "A reporter from a financial ledger reached out this morning. They received an anonymous tip about irregularities in Hale Holdings loan structures." Emily glanced at Sarah. "That was faster than I expected," Sarah said quietly. Emily considered this. "Don't engage yet," she said. "Let them dig." Sarah smiled faintly. "They always do." When Sarah and her associate left, Emily returned to the couch and sat, listening to the apartment settle again. She watched the light shift across the floor as clouds moved overhead. Her phone buzzed again. "Daniel." Margaret is calling lenders directly now. She's trying to shore up confidence. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Margaret always responded to pressure with more pressure. It had worked for decades. It wouldn't now. Another message followed. "Daniel." Mark is panicking. He's reached out twice. Emily didn't respond. She had nothing to say to him. Instead, a memory rose unbidden. Mark, months earlier, standing in their kitchen, frustrated after a meeting had gone poorly. Emily leaning against the counter, listening as he complained about his mother's interference. Her expectations. "You don't understand," he had said then. "She built everything. You don't cross her." Emily had looked at him calmly. "Everything built without accountability eventually collapses," she had said. Mark had laughed it off. The memory dissolved. Emily opened her eyes and reached for her phone again. "Daniel," she said when the call connected, "I want to accelerate phase 2. There was a pause. "That will trigger exposure," he said, publicly. "I know. And custody proceedings are still active. I also know." Another pause, then understood. Emily ended the call and leaned back, her hand resting lightly on her abdomen. Pain flared briefly, then receded. She welcomed it, grounding herself again. This wasn't rage. This was alignment. The afternoon unfolded quietly. Emily fed her son, changed him, moved slowly, deliberately, as if time itself were bending around her. She took a short nap beside the bassinet, waking when her phone chimed softly. A news alert. Breaking. Hale Holdings faces scrutiny over loan practices amid market volatility. Emily read the headline once, then set the phone down. The doorbell rang again. This time, when she opened it, Daniel stood in the hallway. He didn't step inside immediately. He studied her face first. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded and entered. "They're unraveling faster than anticipated," he said. "2 lenders have frozen extensions. One has requested early repayment." Emily sat at the table again, folding her hands loosely. "And Margaret?" Daniel hesitated. "She's furious," he said. "She's blaming Mark." Emily nodded. "That's predictable." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "You know," he said quietly, "there's still time to stop this before it becomes irreversible." Emily met his gaze. "I don't want to stop it," she said. "I want it to be correct." Daniel inclined his head. "As you wish." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Unknown number. Emily stared at it for a moment, then answered. "Yes." "Emily," Margaret Hale's voice said, tight and controlled. "We need to talk." Emily waited. "This has gone far enough," Margaret continued. "You're embarrassing my family." Emily smiled faintly, though Margaret couldn't see it. "You embarrass yourselves," she said calmly. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "You think you won something," Margaret said. "You haven't." "I'm not competing with you," Emily replied. "I'm correcting an error." Margaret laughed brittle. "You don't have the resources to survive what you started." Emily glanced at Daniel, who was watching her intently. "Margaret," she said, "by this time tomorrow, you'll understand exactly what resources I have." Silence. Then the line went dead. Emily set the phone down gently. Her son stirred, then cried softly. She rose and lifted him, holding him close as she paced the room slowly. "It's almost over," she whispered, not as a promise, but as an observation. Another memory flickered at the edge of her mind. Her father, again, sitting across from her in a quiet room years ago, explaining why he had insisted on secrecy for so long. "People behave differently when they think you're weak," he had said. "That's when you see who they really are." Emily kissed her son's forehead. "They showed us," she whispered. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The city pressed on, unaware of the shift happening beneath its surface. Tomorrow, a courtroom would fill with quiet assumptions. Tomorrow, Margaret Hale would walk in expecting control. Emily looked down at her child, then at the skyline beyond the windows. Tomorrow, balance will begin. If you enjoy this story and want the next part, kindly let us know in the comments, and we will make it available on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you can be notified when THHE final part drops.